Tonight on Reporting Scotland. Scotland's business and political leaders hold talks as the Governor of the Bank of England issues an economic warning. A survivors group says it's lost confidence in the Scottish Government's child abuse inquiry following the resignation of its chairwoman. Each leg of this oil platform is 300,000 tonnes of steel and concrete. Shell announces plans to leave them in the North Sea after decommissioning.
You've got to stop watching your left hand.
Formula One champion Sir Jackie Stewart talks about his wife's battle with dementia, which he describes as the biggest challenge of his life.
Helen's long-term memory is faultless. I mean, she could talk about all of those days. Her short-term memory simply doesn't exist.
Also in the programme. More Murray magic at Wimbledon as Jamie makes it through to the quarter-finals of the men's doubles after a 5-set epic. Good evening. Scotland's business and political leaders have been holding talks about the aftermath of the EU referendum. In recent days, financial markets have settled down after the initial shock, but the underlying economy is beginning to show more signs of stress. Over now to our business and economy editor, Douglas Fraser.
Thank you, Jackie. Well, yes, the economy was already slowing up before the European referendum, particularly in Scotland. Since the Brexit vote, warning signs have been flashing more insistently. A poll of British Business Today suggested pessimism about the economy has gone from a quarter of those taking part to nearly half. Now, after the initial shock 11 days ago, stock markets have made up some ground, though some sectors have not, including banks and house builders. The pound continued to weaken today, having already fallen more than 10% as soon as the Brexit result came in. And that should help at least some exporters. But uncertainty about what happens next in politics is undermining confidence in the economy. Today, Aviva and M&G joined this Edinburgh financial giant with a halt to trading in their UK property funds, fearing that investors would rush to withdraw their stakes, destabilising funds for continuing customers. Following the referendum result, the company said market conditions are exceptional and extraordinary. Hopes of selling the government's stakes in Scotland's big banks have been pushed back by the prospect of slower growth and lower earnings.
This will be a setback, let's be quite honest.
And a couple of years to it, surely.
I think at least a couple of years will be pushed back because of it. But, you know, markets turn around and go positive as they do as quickly as they go negative.
That was the background for meetings today between business and political leaders. At Bute House, the First Minister heard concerns from the main industry bodies.
I think there's a number of areas that government can be looking at to make Scotland a more attractive and competitive place to do business, particularly around tax cuts, around APD, around infrastructure projects, making sure that there is still that infrastructure round about us, both economically and physically, to help do business.
Half a mile away, trade bodies were lobbying the UK government.
How do we approach our international trade deals? Do we need to renegotiate those deals, or can we put in place mechanisms that allow the commitments and benefits we already have to be secure going forward? So we had a very clear message today to government around making sure we have the best possible access to the single market, as well as making sure that the trade deals we have are kept in place.
The Scotland Secretary voted last month to remain in the European Union. He says, "We told you this would happen."
I very much hope that we won't have a recession situation, but we obviously are going to have a period of uncertainty, a period where people will not be keen to invest, projects that may have been going ahead in this period being put on hold. That's why it's important to bring as much certainty as we can in as short a timescale as we can. But I'm not dismissing the challenge of doing that.
Well, the Governor of the Bank of England, Mark Carney, spoke out for a third time in recent days, reassuring us that he's taking measures to ease lending conditions for banks. But he was also warning of the Brexit effect spreading to the housing market and to foreign investment, already sharply down. While some foreign investors continue to be big spenders here, this one on golf courses. But Donald Trump's political breakthrough in America means further uncertainties ahead for the global economy.
Thank you very much, Douglas. Well, the First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon, has renewed her call for all EU citizens resident in the UK to be given the right to remain. She was speaking after talks with diplomats from EU governments in Edinburgh. Here's our political correspondent, Glenn Campbell.
Tourists come from near and far to see the First Minister's Edinburgh townhouse. Most only catch a glimpse from the outside. But today's visitors included diplomats representing all corners of Europe, invited to share their concerns following the Brexit vote.
We are getting a lot of phone calls from people who could become Belgians because they find some Belgian blood in them and want to drop the British citizenship into the Belgian one. There's a panic amongst Europeans, not knowing what's going to happen next.
18 consuls attended talks with the First Minister, who stressed that there hasn't yet been any change to the status of EU citizens living here, and her hope that no one should have to leave the country.
It's deeply regrettable that people living here feel a need to consider the option of citizenship of another country. These are concerns that are being communicated to us. I am very, very keen to get a message across that we value people living here.
As well as appealing to the UK government to give all EU citizens already living here the right to remain, the First Minister is also exploring options to maintain Scotland's links with the EU, even if the rest of the UK is coming out. And she's made clear those options include a possible second referendum on Scottish independence. Diplomats tend to use diplomatic language about independence, not wishing to take sides.
Any question of independence for Scotland is an internal matter for the UK, and we would make no comment on that. However, it is clear that were Scotland to be independent, it would be welcome in the EU. There'd be no question about that.
But one Consul General couldn't resist the temptation.
I have to stay impartial, but between me and you, I do.
Wait and see.
Germany's man was more cautious. Best to wait and see what happens, he said. Glenn Campbell reporting, Scotland, Edinburgh.
Well, in the past few minutes, the result of the first round of the race to be leader of the Conservative Party and Prime Minister has been announced. The Scot, Dr Liam Fox, came last in the ballot and has been eliminated. The Home Secretary, Theresa May, came top with 50% of the votes. Andrea Leadsom was second. Michael Gove, the Edinburgh-born Justice Secretary, was next. And then Stephen Crabb, the Inverness-born Work and Pension Secretary. They're all still in the running too. And the next round of the competition is on Thursday. A survivors group says it's lost confidence in the Scottish Government's child abuse inquiry. It follows the resignation of Chairwoman Susan O'Brien, who stepped down after the Deputy First Minister began formal proceedings to sack her. But John Swinney has denied undue interference and insisted the government was trying to ensure costs associated with the inquiry were appropriate. Willie Johnson reports.
From 1964 to 1974, Helen Holland was abused at a home in Kilmarnock run by the Catholic Order of the Sisters of Nazareth. She now staffs a helpline for survivors of care abuse. Helen views current developments with concern.
The survivors who have participated so far have done so with the assurance that this is independent of the government. So if they're now finding out that actually, no, it's not, and the government are having involvement where they shouldn't be, then there are major trust issues in relation to that as well.
Speaking on Radio Scotland, Deputy First Minister John Swinney said the government was required to ensure value for money and questioned, for example, the use of QCs to take witness statements at a cost of around £100 an hour. But he firmly denied putting cash and control ahead of the welfare of victims.
I want to assure survivors today, and I will work to do it for the foreseeable future, that the inquiry will be free to take all of the evidence, to look into all of the issues it needs to look into without fear or favour, and to make sure it does that job properly and comprehensively.
In addition to Susan O'Brien, Cambridge Professor Michael Lamb resigned from the inquiry team last week, also citing government interference. That leaves Glenn Houston, a social care expert from Northern Ireland, as the only remaining panel member for now.
A government spokeswoman said today that officials have been instructed already to identify replacements for Ms O'Brien and Professor Lamb. She also insisted that evidence gathered so far for the inquiry would stand, and that public hearings planned for November would go ahead.
This Scottish head of a national children's charity says it's vital to get the inquiry back on track.
Clearly, until the inquiry is fully staffed again, victims will be concerned, and I think it's important the government acts swiftly to set the inquiry on a sound footing.
Victims will seek those reassurances and more when they meet Mr Swinney on Thursday to hear what happens next. Willie Johnston, reporting Scotland.
Still to come on this evening's programme, we take a look at the National Museum of Scotland after its £40 million upgrade.
And in sport, Andy Murray on his quarter-final match against Jo-Wilfried Tsonga at Wimbledon. And we're with a golfer enjoying a Highland homecoming at the Scottish Open. See you soon.
Shell has announced it plans to leave the giant legs of its 3 Brent oil platforms in the North Sea when it completes decommissioning work. Each leg is made of concrete and steel and weighs about 300,000 tonnes. Stephen Duff has the story.
Decommissioning is already well underway on Shell's Brent Delta. At some point next year, a specialist barge will move into place. The final lift, cutting the platform from the legs, will take just 10 seconds. The structure will be dismantled on shore. But these huge concrete and steel legs will be left standing, each the equivalent weight of the Empire State Building.
The collision risk is about 1 in every 10,000 years. On balance, we think that the risk associated with the technical complexity associated with refloat, the technical complexity associated with cutting and lifting the legs, just doesn't make sense to do anything other than leave them.
The operation started in the early hours of the morning. Sheriff officers, police and Shell staff were hoisted aboard the Brent spar by crane.
Shell still bears the scars of this decommissioning debacle in the 1990s. Plans to dispose of the Brent spar at sea abandoned amid direct and embarrassing action by Greenpeace. Shell says it's consulted widely on what to do this time, but one environmental group is not convinced.
This is an industry that pushed the boundaries of science and engineering to get hold of the oil and gas in the North Sea, so they should at least be pushed as hard to ensure that use the same technology and engineering skills to try and clean up as much as possible.
Shell will need permission from the UK government to leave behind this man-made mark. The question is, will this become the benchmark for the hundreds of North Sea installations that will eventually have to be decommissioned? Stephen Duff reporting Scotland, Aberdeen.
In future, thousands of people who need joint replacements may have their recovery monitored by a simple tablet handheld computer. The Golden Jubilee Hospital in Clydebank is the first hospital in Europe to try out the technology, which allows doctors to keep a much closer eye on the recovery of their patients. Here's our health correspondent, Eleanor Bradford.
For a select number of people, going home after a knee replacement has become more technical.
Now, I've got one of these devices to check your range of motion on your knee. Right. What we need to do first is just put this tracker onto your leg. Okay.
Right. The Golden Jubilee in Clydebank is trialling the use of a new gadget to monitor movement.
So this is the device here. You can see your knee on the device, and we'll get you to bend your knee up and down.
It uses motion sensors similar to those in mobile phones and pedometers.
Excellent. Okay.
And allows the hospital to constantly monitor its patients, which is very different from what normally happens.
Normally we telephone the patients at 2 weeks after surgery, and then they have a further follow-up at 6 weeks. But what this device would enable us to do is continual assessment on a daily basis, and we could pick up patients that are having problems earlier.
It just keeps you on course, and just the reassurance that you're doing it right.
During her recovery, Wendy continues to use the monitor and tablet, and it pushes her to do that rehab, although she did need a hand with the newfangled technology.
Once I got it home, and I have to say that my son was helping me, but once you got into the swing of it all, and you're doing it every day, then it just became sort of second nature.
That shows how well she's been able to move her knee.
Back at the hospital, Mr. Welsh gets the results, even if his patient is miles away.
So this, at the end, is her getting much more flexibility?
Yes, so she's getting a lot more range of bend, effectively, of her knee.
This study just goes to show that the technology we're used to using at home on our tablets and mobiles is also being used by the medical world. And because it's cheap, it's getting closer to patients to improve their experience. Eleanor Bradford, reporting Scotland at the Golden Jubilee in Clydebank.
Well, now let's take a look at other stories from across the country. Major rail improvement projects are behind schedule, with costs spiralling, according to a report by the Office of Rail and Road. Transport Minister Humza Yousaf has said he is particularly disappointed that the Edinburgh-Glasgow line will not run electric services until July 2017, 7 months later than scheduled. Network Rail Scotland said they are committed to delivering improvements within agreed funding limits. 24 families have lost their school places for the 2016-17 session after being caught giving false statements to get their children into Edinburgh schools. Officials uncovered 13 catchment frauds at high schools and 11 at primaries. The original Declaration of Arbroath is to be given special status by the United Nations. The letter, written in 1320, voices support for an independent Scotland and is still regarded as a statement of a nation's claim to freedom. UNESCO status recognises its cultural significance and will offer protection to the rare and delicate document, which was last seen on public display 11 years ago. Doctor Who star David Tennant received an honorary degree from his old acting school today. The Broadchurch actor was awarded an honorary drama doctorate from the Royal Conservatoire of Scotland. The 46-year-old studied there from 1988 to 1991, when it was known as the Royal Scottish Academy of Music and Drama. The second stage of flood defence work in the Water of Leith in Edinburgh is underway. New walls, embankments and floodgates will be erected along the stretch of river at Murrayfield and Roseburn. The area suffered extensive flooding in 2000. 2 years ago, the wife of the former Formula One world champion Sir Jackie Stewart was diagnosed with dementia. She now needs round-the-clock care. Now, for the first time, Sir Jackie has been talking publicly about his wife's condition, which he describes as the biggest challenge of his life. Jane McCubbin has been to meet him.
Theirs has been a charmed life.
Lady Stewart, your pit girl.
Yeah, she was the ultimate pit girl. She did all the timing, she did the lap charting. I mean, it was a laser mind. In one split-second stopwatch, she could take 26 racing cars every single lap.
Beautiful, talented, Sir Jackie's invaluable teammate.
It was a different world, and Helen was just so precise on that. It was just amazing.
And that razor-sharp mind you're speaking about, it's slipping now.
Yes. Helen's long-term memory is faultless. I mean, she could talk about all of those days. Her short-term memory simply doesn't exist. Now that's a proper lap chart you're doing there with the...
Over the years, Lady Stewart documented every detail of their life together. A life which began on a blind date, though she tells me she wasn't the date.
When the other person saw him, she says, I'm not going out with him.
Quite right.
I said, well, he's asked me out, so if you don't mind, I'll go. We never left each other after that.
59 years of life together, bound in 18 volumes. Family life, Formula One life.
These binders that your mum painstakingly did, they've kind of taken on a new meaning now.
And I remember well doing it with her, because I used to sit next to her. I was 6, 7 years old, you know, and so she likes talking about the, the past.
Every time he won, she was by his side. Every time there was another death, she was there too. He was outspoken, fighting for better safety. Now, facing his biggest ever personal challenge, he is fighting dementia. Today, he launches a charity with £1 million of his own money.
Race Against Dementia is what it's called. And that's what motor racing is. We change things faster and more successfully in the shortest of time than any other industry or any other activity in the world. The current great designer is called Adrian Newey, and he's won 9 world championships for different teams. I want to find an Adrian Newey in the medical research area. All these other girls were around me on the podium.
You've dealt with fear through your career. Do you feel that fear with dementia?
I'm trying to manage my head in the same way as I handled it by getting back into a racing car when somebody was killed. So at the moment, my focus is starting up this new charity, and I just hope we'll get the support we need.
And the best of luck to him. Now, to other matters in the sporting world. David's here.
Thank you very much, Jackie. Good evening. Andy Murray says he can't afford to think about the later stages at Wimbledon, or he'll get distracted from tomorrow's quarter-final. He faces the world number 12, Jo-Wilfried Tsonga of France, for a place in the semis. But Andy's not the only Murray looking forward to a quarter-final, as Kerdinad San reports.
A memorial to the longest match of all time, 70-68 in the fifth between Isner and Mahut. That was 6 years ago. That's court 18. Jamie Murray's on court 17 this way. This is court 17. Last night they finished after 9 o'clock at 13 all in the fifth. Surely we're not in for another epic.
Thankfully not. In fact, only another 4 games were required as Murray and Suarez came through 16-14 in the fifth.
Our goal at the start of the tournament was to try to win the tournament, and you know, we won 3 matches so far, and yeah, concentrate hard on the next match. It's going to be a tough match regardless of who we play, but you know, going to be a tough match for them as well. We're playing some good tennis, and I think we're both really excited about it.
Little brother is just as excited. For him tomorrow, a quarter-final against Jo-Wilfried Tsonga of France, with no thought spared for the big names like Novak Djokovic, who've already been knocked out.
Those results that have happened don't affect me yet. You know, if I reach the final, you know, maybe it's different coming up against someone different to Novak, but right now it has no bearing. My draw's still, you know, been challenging. You know, Tsonga's an extremely tough player in the next round as well, so worth sort of concentrating on those matches. And you know, you get distracted at this level, it can cost you.
The Davis Cup won't be a distraction. It's after Wimbledon, and both Murray brothers are in the team for the tie away to Serbia. Andy says he'll wait until after he's done an SW19 before deciding whether to play.
Scotland's top golfer says the next fortnight could be career-building stuff for him. Inverness-born Russell Knox has flown from his home in Florida for the Scottish Open, which begins on Thursday, then the Open Championship the week after. He's been speaking to Phil Goodlad.
July in the Highlands is a tad cooler than in Florida, but Russell Knox is well versed to acclimatising. Although having jetted in this morning, the local boy has just one thing on his mind.
Take out the clubs here this afternoon and maybe go stroll 9 holes and try and stay awake. Yeah, I think that would be number one. But it's just golf. It's a numbers game. I'll be able to figure it out.
Players from all over the world have once again gathered here at Castle Stuart for its 4th staging of the Scottish Open, and Knox isn't the only American-based Scot returning to his Highland roots.
We love coming home and playing our home event. Obviously, as I said, it's a big tournament, but. Yeah, I mean, looking forward to a great week, and as you said, you know, who knows what will happen at the end of the week.
Dornoch man Jimmy Gunn, like many here this week, hoping for a good showing, as 4 qualifying spots are still available for the Open Championship next week. But for Russell Knox, who's already qualified for Troon, the goal is the Ryder Cup in September.
This is career-building stuff. I mean, if I can go out, I mean, you never know, someone's going to get really hot here and maybe win a couple. Just going to try and take it one shot at a time and smile and hopefully I'll have a chance.
If he wins here at home, expect even greater smiles.
And that's all from me, Jackie. Smiling as ever.
Now, it's Hello Dolly in her new look home. The National Museum of Scotland in Edinburgh has had a £14 million upgrade, and Maura Kinneborough has been given a preview.
The upgrade's unveiled, finishing touches to 10 museum galleries ahead of Friday's opening.
We wanted things that would be inspiring, we wanted things that would be exciting, we wanted things that would be surprising. So we've got old favourites like steam locomotives and ship models. We've got brand new things like Formula One cars and tiny bits of biomedical kit.
There's more to entertain and inspire as well as educate.
The 150-year-old Victorian Museum was getting a little tired, so they've invested in modernising the science and art sections to make them more interesting and interactive.
This energy machine, a new way to learn about power. 3/4 of these objects have been brought out of storage, unseen for at least a generation.
The National Museum of Scotland now ranks amongst the best in the world. There is no other national museum in the world with such a huge breadth of collections under a single roof. And I think putting together the breadth of the collections with the engaging way in which we've interpreted them provides a unique experience, I think, here in Scotland.
Visitor figures are predicted to rise again with this latest phase of modernisation.
We are juxtaposing past and present, if not even future, because many of these designers are using really new technologies and new materials and really challenging our perception of what fashion, or in this case footwear, even is, such as these shoes here designed by the architect Zaha Hadid, and you've got that in contrast with these 19th century Bath shoes.
Reflecting Scotland to the world and the world to Scotland in the hope of attracting generations to come. Maura Kinneborough, reporting Scotland, Edinburgh.
We're reflecting the Scottish weather now with Christopher.
Jackie, thank you very much indeed. Hello there, good evening to you. Well, fairly unsettled conditions last week and indeed this week. Why? We need to look to the jet stream, this river of wind way up in the atmosphere moving across the Atlantic, and it's static, it's not moving north or south, so it's just delivering weather system after weather system all last week and indeed all this week. So periods of showers, rain at times, and at times quite a cool, fresh feel as well, because it's also the dividing line between really quite warm air to the south of it and cooler, fresher air to the north. We're on the cusp of it. It's not a washout. Yes, we'll have some sunshine. This was the scene in North Berwick earlier, very nice, but also some rain, some heavy downpours across the northeast through the course of today. You'll know about it if you've got caught in one. But those showers are easing away as we head through the course of the evening. You can see it on the satellite and radar there, the showers just pulling away. So for many, some late sunshine to end the day, the showers fading away, and then largely dry overnight, light winds away from Shetland, and temperatures in towns and cities around 8 or 9 Celsius. But in the countryside, under those clear conditions, it could be down to a chilly 4 or 5. Tomorrow, and it gets off to a bright sunny start for most, but quickly clouding over in the west with some outbreaks of rain pushing in towards the Hebrides and Argyll, and then through the course of the day just edging their way inland to around about the spine of the country by mid-afternoon. Here's the scene then at 4 o'clock. Across the southern uplands, well, the rain will be fairly light and patchy, but fairly persistent across the west coast. Further east through the central belt, yes, expect things to turn a bit damp. Across Fife, Tayside and Aberdeenshire, driest here for longest and thus warmest, 17, 18 degrees. Dry also for the far north and the northern Isles, but the rain coming your way. Here it is, and there it goes, working its way right across the country. So a fairly soggy night as we head overnight Wednesday to Thursday. But come Thursday, the rain has cleared away for most, still affecting Shetland, perhaps some northern parts of the mainland. But for many on Thursday, it's dry with some spells of sunshine in the east, highs of 20 degrees. That's the forecast for now.
Thank you, Christopher. And now a reminder of tonight's main news headline. Liam Fox has been eliminated from the race to be the next Conservative leader and Prime Minister after finishing last in a ballot of Tory MPs. The Home Secretary, Theresa May, topped the ballot, followed by the Energy Minister, Andrea Leadsom. Michael Gove and Stephen Crabb are still in the running too. A further round of voting is due to be held on Thursday. And that's Reporting Scotland. Good evening.